Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the podcast. Today, I'm speaking with Lou Horgan. She is a teacher and facilitator and teacher trainer of yoga and a mama of two. And Lou has taught yoga in Dublin for the past 16 years. It's her passion, and she has a really true passion for a deeper understanding for women's health and for their rights of passage are central to the work that she does. And also through her own journey, she has come to understand that women's needs are often not met through traditional yoga teachings. So she teaches yoga as a way of holding and growing into all cycles of womanhood and manhood, although there mightn't be that many men there at the classes. And she's taught over 5,000 women through her pregnancy classes, as well as over 1,000 couples through her active birthing workshops. So Lou, you're so welcome, and it's so lovely to have you here. And I'm really looking forward to this chat. So welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. Trying to have a chat with you.
Yes, and I have known you for a while, but I wanted to introduce you to everybody and just explain a little bit about what you do and about your practice and just your whole ethos and your way of living, because I think it's really powerful and it's something that I think the listeners will really enjoy and relate to. And I suppose we'll start off with where it all began for you. How did you come to start practicing yoga in the first place?
Sure. So next near 20 years ago, I started to practice yoga in a gym in Dublin. I had dabbled a little bit when I was in India, but very much as a tourist, as a kind of a, go on a rickshaw ride, join a yoga class. It didn't leave a huge impression on me when I was in India, but something really clicked with me when I started practicing in Dublin. And I'd say within about a year or so, I had decided that I wanted to explore it more, and I wanted to enter into some class of immersion, whether that's a teacher training or a deeper insight into the whole practice. And I ended up going back to India. And I went back into a very classical, traditional hatha yoga practice in an ashram. Very strict, very old school, and at the time absolutely perfect for me, because I knew there was something that I wasn't quite getting out of the classes that I was attending that were very much physical, alignment based. There was really no understanding of how it could affect your psycho-spiritual well-being. However, I was feeling very altered when I was leaving classes, and I knew there was something going on. Now, I was simultaneously exploring a lot of work in energy healing. So that modality, they almost felt separate. And then when I spent time in India, I was like, okay, there was a marriage that happened. I could really feel the depths that the embodiment of the yoga practice was bringing me to. So yeah, that was about a 3-month immersion in India, and then I decided to come back. I was living in the UK at the time by then, and I completed a teacher training in the UK with a really, really great school. They were interdisciplinary, so they introduced us into a lot of different styles, traditions, and ethos, but all ultimately pointing you in the same direction, which is your own self, your own exploration, your own unique experience of the world. And that path I traveled for quite a number of years. I became pregnant. I was simultaneously studying pregnancy yoga, and that completely changed the trajectory of how I taught when it came to me giving birth. I often refer to it as the greatest yoga practice I've ever had to embody. It brings it all in. As far as I was concerned, it was the greatest experience, body, mind, spirit, I went to depths that no handstand in the middle of the room, no pranayama practice, nothing could have really prepared me for it. I touched into a place that not only transformed me, but it really transformed my worldview. It transformed how I taught yoga. And in a sense, it created a huge questioning around what I knew so far, what I had learned so far. It was a big missing chunk of wisdom that just wasn't covered. So I got busy and I taught as many women as I could get my hands on this quintessential possibility as they move through their pregnancy and their labor and their birth and their rite of passage into motherhood. And I always felt a little yoga, that's so nice, you must just kind of twiddle your wrists and lie on the floor. And that used to upset me because I really, really felt that people were missing out on what it was that was going on in women's bodies. So that continued for a bunch of years. And then I found myself in a great big teacher training, having had my little girl. So I'd given birth for a second time. I was in the UK. I had left her for the first time to go on this teacher training. There's over 100 people in the room and 98% of them were women. I had just got my first period after having not had one since before I was pregnant with her, and she was about 1 year old at this stage. I was still breastfeeding her. And I was in this teacher training and we started to talk about the cycles of yoga, of life, the cycle, Swara yoga. And we must have spent 2 hours on the left nostril. We spent another 2 hours on the right nostril. We went into the cycle of the day, and we went into the cycle of the practice, and we went into the cycle of the cycles. And I just kind of sat there and I was, when is this guy going to mention the menstrual cycle? The cycle we're all born out of. And it just never came up. So I put my hand up and I was very, very vulnerable and sensitive and alive with this. And I was given the right answer that I'd heard since the very beginning. Oh, the menstrual cycle. Well, you don't do handstand and you don't do shoulder stand when you have your menstrual cycle, which was far than satisfying answer. And then he said, and he could see that I was very upset by the fact that that was so, I suppose, undervaluing. Superficial and undervaluing what I was communicating. And I could see all the heads bopping up and down in agreement when I was talking about altered state premenstrually, heightened intuition, heightened sensitivity, and could he, open up the conversation on that as far as a yogic perspective. And of course he couldn't. He came from a lineage, one of the oldest lineages, and that's why he's such an amazing teacher. But it was a lineage of men downloading a spiritual, philosophical practice through the bodies of men. Through a man's hormonal cycle, which is vastly different, it's more of a 24-hour cycle in tune with the sun, to the point that the asana practice of yoga really happens in the morning in order to dissipate all of that sexual energy that arises in men in the morning. And in that moment, I realized, wow, Hatha yoga means sun, moon, and the union of the two. But really I had been only taught through a very solar perspective. So it was time to now go. I was heartbroken leaving this teacher because I was like, I had him on a bit of a pedestal. And I went then and I explored for a number of years. A tricky one to study because it was never written down. It was purely experiential and verbally passed on through the tradition and lineage of women, and broken and hidden for a very, very long time, whereas the male tradition continued right the way through the ages. And that's really been what I've been working with since Alana was 1. She's 8 now, so it's the past 7 years.
Yeah.
The cycle of our lives as women, the very embodiment of our spiritual practices, they're in us. I really don't see the need for us to go and sit in a cave for 20 years. If the possibility exists for us to touch into deep states of divine inspiration monthly, from the time we're little girls, a force awakens in us, then most women, not all women, will experience pregnancy and labor and birth. That's a bigger cycle within the monthly cycles. And then we will all move through a perimenopause and menopausal cycle to really embody all of that micro dosing of spiritual wisdom, to embody that at the I suppose the peak of our lives as women in our postmenopausal time, when we can really hold that power for ourselves. And
I think it's something that, as you say, is probably missing a lot of the time from yoga practices. And I love that you're embodying that, because it is so important. And what I find that with the menstrual cycle, a lot of the time people tend to see it as an inconvenience, and probably labor as well. I know a lot of people who there's no question that they're going in, they're getting an epidural, they don't want to feel any pain. And the same with the menstrual cycle. If you begin to feel any cramps, now, not saying that we should feel cramps, but if we begin to feel any cramps, that, take a painkiller, get rid of the pain, and get on with your life. And I think there's so much power in the menstrual cycle if we use it and we go with that flow on a weekly basis, and so much power in the process of labor. And as you said, it totally brought your yoga practice to a new level going through that process. And I think it's really empowering. And that for me was so important to go through the process of labor, because I knew that it would empower me on so many levels, in addition to empowering my children through that process. So I'd love to talk about that a little bit more, and how that kind of just awakened you to these new levels of your practice, and how that just developed your practice.
Well, I suppose it comes back to experiencing it. The body is the greatest tool we've got. And like you say, this cycle that we're born into as women has been conceived as a inconvenience. And I know plenty of women over the years who practiced so much yoga, they stopped their menstrual cycle, and that was considered kind of normal. So really what was being taught was what the world was teaching you. It's an inconvenience, and we can medicate for that. You can take hormonal contraceptive pills, which have lots of value in one regard, but it stops your menstrual cycle. And the epidural has lots of value as well, but it stops you feeling your labor. So there's been plenty of I suppose, societal and cultural stories that have talked us out of it for a very, very long time. And then you take HRT when you get to the menopause, and there you go. You don't feel anything, you don't feel anything. But what are we not feeling? What are we being disconnected from, or what are we missing out on? And there's a moment that through the awareness that a yoga practice gives you, that awareness of your body, the subtleties of your body, the subtleties of your breath, the subtleties of being in the moment in your body and your breath, the space it gives you in your mind, it's a right platform. It's a really ripe, open stage to invite in that really profound instinctual wisdom that arises in us. It's not that we have to, sit on our yoga mats for 5 days as we bleed and sit in some deep meditation. They're micro moments, they're gestures to ourselves to see what's been shown. And if we go back to that moon, the idea of the moon, we are very full and peak and bright and alive as the full moon is in the sky. We have endless patience and endless energy, and we can be all things to all people. We can be very social, we can be super chatty, and all of that's available to us every month. But really, that is not our exclusive gear. We have the absolute polar opposite of that, which is an internalized, quietude, restful, self-care time inbuilt in our bodies. But because the world is so solar, it's day, night, day, night, day, night, day, night, day, night, go action, sleep, action, sleep, action, sleep. Our greater cycle within that isn't regarded. So over the years of teaching, and I just did a teacher training there a couple of weeks ago, and it was so interesting. The same thing happened again. There were a couple of postnatal women in the class. I was certainly very premenstrual at the time. There was another woman who I could see clearly was having some really deep heat releases. She was, somewhere in her menopausal time. And the teacher who was teaching had absolutely no sense of what was going on. Again, another brilliant guy. And when I brought his attention to it, he thought, wow, I know nothing about this stuff. And it's that same thing we can find in every area of the world right now, that disregard or disconnection from or suppression of this divine feminine awakening. It's happening everywhere. And I suppose I've taken it in both hands for the yoga world. It is so important, because at the end of the day, if it was only guys who were doing yoga, well, maybe it's not so relevant. But usually, in my experience, it's always over 90% of the room are female.
Mm. And I love that point, that it's like this practice that we've all been doing, but just missing half of it.
And it's the most obvious thing. But isn't that always the case? It's we overthink it. We overcomplicate it. It's the simple, it's right under your nose every time. And I love that about it. I love that even though I have known the translation of Hatha Yoga since day one, teacher training, open your man, balance the sun, balance the moon. Okay, I got that. Balance the divine and the feminine and the masculine within you. But the story hasn't been told to its full completion. And nor do we even know what the full completion is. But for now, along with all of the other things that are going on in the world and this rebalance of power that seems to be happening, this is another chapter in that story.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about the divine feminine, because I think that, as you say, it's something that's emerging really powerfully. And for me, it's been something that I've fought, because I came from, before I was in energy healing and meditation and teaching, I came from a corporate, background where I was, in marketing and event management, and I wasn't interested in the feminine or the divine feminine or anything like that. I loved energy healing, but the whole divine feminine thing didn't draw me. But little by little, I found that I was reading books or attending workshops, and it kept coming up, and I kept just being drawn into it, and I was fighting it. But now I think I've kind of handed myself over and said, okay, I'm going to go with my intuitive side. I'm going to let that lead me. I'm going to stop being so action oriented. And it's not saying that action is bad, action is needed, but intuition first and then action. And I just want to talk a bit about that, because if people do have not a hang up, but maybe they're not so familiar with the divine feminine and what it's about, just to talk about how that can benefit and empower us to lead our lives in more intuitive ways.
Sure. Well, I think that's what I like to really, 'cause, the divine feminine, what is that? It sounds kind of light and beautiful, and I suppose I would be very similar to yourself. I turned up my masculine in order to survive in the world. And anything divine feminine-y, the part of me that might have been pulled towards even that language, really I turned down. And I think that's really quite common. It's to really escalate the part of yourself that you can negotiate with out in the world. And or certainly my interpretation of it, and the way I like to language it to women, is it's in its truest form, it's terrifyingly beautiful. There's a huge power to it, and we embody it as women. And when I have, a class or a course and I'm working with people over a number of weeks, I really like to strip it back to how relatable it is to us. The fact that every woman can relate to her knowingness. Every woman can relate to, I knew that. Oh my God, I totally knew that. And I knew that for 2 years before I did anything about it. Just knowingness. That's the divine feminine. The carrying. The emotional carrying, the carrying of the emotional needs of others. Women know that place. We know that we are carrying not only ourselves, but we are carrying our families, our relationships, our business colleagues in lots of instances. That ability to carry, that's the divine feminine. It's that essential truth of ourselves that we undervalue. Often you can just get to a woman by saying, that bit of yourself that you just kind of don't value very much, that's your divine feminine. And it's the carrier, the vessel. And it's not until I have found, certainly in my experience, that women are really confronted with that part of themselves. And the big entry points into yoga are pregnancy and perimenopause. That's when I see people coming into the class. They're like, okay, this thing is happening in my body. There's lots of people who do it their whole lives, but they're the two big, I'm starting yoga because I'm 46 and there's something going down, or I'm 36 and I'm having a baby. And when we look at the greater expression of the divine feminine, our planet, oftentimes I just say to women, are you pulling on resources you don't have? Can you see that in our planet? Can you see how we're pulling on resources we don't have? We're just pretending that everything's okay, and we just keep on pumping oil out of the ground. Or we're just pretending that I can just keep on going day in, day out, month in, month out, and override this deep instinctual wisdom, this very essence of creation that we carry in ourselves as women. And I just really like to strip it back to real practical stuff, and the force that awakens in us from our earliest years in preteen right the way through to our final days. And that force just keeps awakening and awakening and awakening and awakening and calling to us. And if we're lucky, we listen. but there is I suppose there is an emergency C-section that can happen if we try to run away from our real force. And that, on a micro level can happen through lots of crises, whether they be, through labor and birth, or through health crises, or what seems to be really very prevalent in women that I'm encountering is a lot of anxiety and depression.
Mm. Yeah.
And that to me is indicative of overriding, or at least not even knowing you're overriding, because we've been told a story for a very long time to override our power. It comes back to power, really, doesn't it? But
yeah.
It's internalized power as opposed to a solar externalized power.
That's exactly it. And I see a lot of that anxiety with my clients, but also that giving the power away and not recognizing the power within. And it's like, well, who can I go to fix me? Or what can I do to fix me? Or, how can I get rid of this? And looking outside of ourselves in order to change or to get back to, normal, where all the time the power is within, but we're looking everywhere else but within. And yes, maybe it's the yoga practice that awakens that, ability to look within, or maybe it's an energy healing that gives you the space to look within. But I really find that a lot of the people who I'm working with, they have the answers. They know, as you say, that inner knowing.
I know, and it there's timing involved in it to actually arrive at that. I knew that, and before it really percolates up to the level of your consciousness, you're like, oh.
And sometimes we're blocking that because the stress and anxiety isn't allowing that inner knowing to bubble to the surface. And that can be a factor as well. But I think it's so important to start claiming that power, to step into that power. And that can be scary. And it can be really just an unknown territory. And that's what I love about your teachings, because it helps to navigate that territory with, your guidance and someone who's maybe a few steps ahead and who's walked that path. And I want to talk a bit about your workshop coming up, the Shakti, the essence of creation. It's actually, I'd love to go to it myself, but it clashes with my meditation class, but I would definitely be there otherwise. But yeah, I just love this whole concept about Shakti and the essence of creation. So what's that about?
Well, it's an opportunity for women to go. So I work with, 10 women for 6 weeks, and it's 2 hours per practice. So we very much follow a wave of low to the ground, deep breath, quietude, into physical practice, and right the way back down into meditation. And it's to continually emphasize the natural pattern of Shakti, which is, the divine feminine, which is nature, which is the creative essence, that we have. We just have it. We have access to it. And this is the one thing that arises more and more and more. I really find, particularly working with women, you only have to scratch the surface and they're in. Because it's not like I'm trying to promote an idea that they aren't already deeply aware of. It might come in the form of me languaging something, but sure enough, if you spend 2 hours on your yoga mat, the word becomes an embodied feeling. And then it's the realm of feeling. And then the realm of feeling can bring us to a deeper place. But Shakti, I suppose, is the yogic term for the divine feminine essence, and was always considered to be in the most abundant form in the pelvis. So whenever I learned about Shakti, it was always the pelvic energy, the pelvic energy, the pelvic energy, and we're trying to get Shakti to rise in the body, to merge with Shiva, which is consciousness. But I like to talk about Shakti as not only a pelvic energy, but it's a womb energy. Whether you have a womb or not, you know, lots of women have come through the classes and they've experienced hysterectomies through their life. It's the energy of the womb. It's that deep, creative place. So creative, you could create a human being out of it, but it's the place where everything you've ever created, the energy behind everything you've ever created was born. And it's to really tap into awareness of that place. So for the first couple of weeks, we're just bringing awareness into the pelvis, into the womb, into that whole area of creativity, sexuality, which is huge. Because if there's one source power that we can connect to, you know, creativity, great, I can make a baby. Well, the step before that is female sexuality, which is again, so deeply powerful, but so maligned and misunderstood and suppressed and feared. And really, I'm coaxing that out of the pelvis week by week, bringing it into expression, meeting it with the action. Yes, okay, I got it. Now what I'm going to do with it. But to always bring it to heart, to the well-being of the whole. And I think that is really very much encoded in us as women as well. We have that natural predisposition to the well-being of our whole, whatever that is, our family, our workplace, our environment. I do quite a bit of work around the throat as well, because to have your voice, to be heard, to deeply listen, it requires a lot of deep listening. And then sure enough, we'll end up somewhere around the third eye by the 6th week. And then that's the big intuitive center. And it's that instinctual self and that intuitive self and that gut instinct and that inner seeing. And it's to bring it all together and just let it move and churn. And that might be awakening women to a whole other way of considering their bodies or their subtle bodies. Or for people who are more experienced with practices, a very, very deep experiential practice. And
amazing.
It depends where you are on the, you know, and plenty of women have come in and they're like, I haven't done a lot of yoga, you know, so it can really depend on where you're at. But it's really the ones that are least experienced sometimes with yoga as they perceive it, that just like, oh my God, I got this, I get it.
I was going to ask that, do you have to have a certain level to attend the class?
I mean, I wouldn't take somebody in who's never done yoga before, because we do move through a yoga practice. So there would be some prerequisites that I would be happier, I suppose, with women knowing, like, you know, downward dog, you know, but it's okay with this. There's a huge range of experience. Most women have, who would come to a course like that, in my experience, have done some yoga. But it's often, most women come to me, whether through those courses, and they're going, I know I have to do something, you know, and I've done a bit of yoga and I know I have to do something. And then there's people who've done pregnancy yoga with me, and this is another cycle I find myself in. I may not have laid eyes on somebody for 9 or 10 years, and now they've got their 12-year-old and their 8-year-old at home, and they know they need to do something. They've been in deep motherhood, as I call it, you know, that, you know, constant outsourcing of energy. And now they're coming back. And that point of re-entry, the Shakti course is really lovely because, again, it's a journey like the pregnancy yoga was.
Yeah, because I've been to your classes and I've done your pregnancy classes, which are amazing. And I find I've been to yoga classes where it's been like a workout, where
There's a
there,
lot of workouts.
yeah, there isn't that element of the spirituality side, which
Yeah,
I love as well, because your classes are technical. It's about, getting to that spiritual side and marrying, the other side of it as well. It's not just one or the other, it's that
yeah.
marrying.
Well, I always looked for context in a yoga class. It was always, well, why am I doing this? Why am I doing a triangle shape? What is the point? So really, I referred to the teacher in the UK who couldn't answer my question when it came to my own female journey. He was such a great teacher of context. Every pose has an energetic effect. To what do you direct that? It's really about owning what's happening. And yoga, there is absolutely no question. The one thing I have seen in the 16 odd years of teaching is the trajectory is stronger, faster, hotter, more powerful, less to do with personal growth and personal fulfillment, and more to do with body beautiful. And Body Beautiful is great. And, I first went to that yoga class in that gym because I wanted Madonna's arms. I just remember thinking, oh, Madonna's doing yoga. Oh, I like her arms. I want to do yoga. And that's great. And that's fine. But it's also really important that there's somewhere to grow in all of that. And I suppose that's why there's teachers like me. There's lots of gym stuff, and then there's teachers like me, and people will grow into the other stuff, hopefully.
Because I find you can get sucked into that, the whole Instagram yoga thing where it's like, oh, I've mastered that pose, I have to get to the next one, and okay, what's next? And okay, I can do a handstand, now I have to press to handstand, or it's like there's no end.
Right?
Yeah, yeah.
Whereas I think the feminine is the process. I think the masculine is goals, and there's loads of value, but the very nature of the womb is the nature of the process. It's the unfolding of the process. And listen, I know Instagram. I mean, I had a whole new website created, and it's all very beautiful. And the woman who did it for me, she said, "So you gotta start Instagramming." And I still haven't done it. I don't know if I've missed the boat with it. I don't even know what I do. But I know if I went down that rabbit hole, I would feel the pressure to do fancy yoga poses on a beach in my bikini. And I know that part of me is really alive, that kind of like, oh, look at me. Isn't this gorgeous? Don't I look great? So I've been resisting that and sticking with the old school word of mouth process.
And I think sometimes you were talking about the process, just being in that energy, that's nearly harder than, the goals of getting that,
so harder.
It's easy to have those goals that say, okay, I've ticked that box, let's move on to the next step. But being in that process, being in that presence is so much harder. And that's really the challenge, I think, for just that beingness rather than the doing. So of course, there's the doing side of it as well, which complements it. But just being in that state of connecting and going within, and not being in the outward state of having to look or, be a certain way. That's really the challenge, I think, for us in our world of, action and doing and busyness, just to sit and be.
Yeah. Well, it's the undervalued state, and it's the underpracticed state. You know, that's the place that we're not practiced in. We really are not practiced in from the moment we begin our lives. It's really all to do with the external. So much so that we forget. You know, we completely forget that place. Yet women are called back. You're pulled back in. You keep getting pulled back in. From, you know, as soon as you hit your pre-teen years or your teen years, you're pulled back in. And certainly the narrative I was given was, well, that's an inconvenience. Well, yeah, you're a woman. I do remember that. Like, oh, you're a woman now. But it's an inconvenience, you know. And I remember a long time ago, maybe I was about 17 or 18, and I was sitting on my couch at home and I was watching Oprah Winfrey, and Dr. Christiane Northrup, who wrote Women's Bodies, Women's Wisdom, was being interviewed. And she said, it's not premenstrual tension. It's not premenstrual tension. It's premenstrual truth. And I got a shiver in that moment. And I, from that time on, used to watch what came up every time. What did I know already that used to drive me nuts in premenstrual truth? I was like, I don't want to see that right now. So I really don't think we have to try very hard. It is less known, but it's there. And you create space for it to arise, you invite, and it comes in more and more and more. And that's what's really surprised me. How it really is happy to be, you know, that energy is looking for your attention. As soon as you give it, it's there.
And I'm finding
it comes with maturity too. Absolutely. You know, it comes with years and age. I don't know if this all would have been happening for me anyway.
But what I'm finding is that there's like a speeding up where it's coming in younger and younger. People who are a lot younger are getting almost to that maturity earlier. And the other thing I'm finding is that when I'm meditating and when I connect with that like inner sanctuary, I call it, I don't want to be anywhere else. I want to stay here. But what I wanted to, I'm just conscious of your time as well, and what I wanted to do was to share with everybody how to contact you and to work with you if they want to attend your courses, because you have so many other things that you do. We haven't even touched on some of the other workshops and events and retreats you have, and I know you've loads coming up. You've something exciting happening in October as well.
Teacher training in October for yoga teachers on all of this, you know, you know, what we've been talking around. It's time, I think, I shared it beyond my students and started training already teachers in this modality as well, just to bring in the underbelly of practices.
And I think it's so important and so needed at this time, because as you say, people are searching for it. And I find that with clients, they're coming to me because they're being called and they're like, I just knew I had to come. I don't know why, but I'm here. And so your website is louyoga.com, L-O-U yoga.com. And your course, the Shakti, the Essence of Creation, is starting on the 30th of May. That's right. Have you places left if people still want to book in?
I do have places left. I have 4 places left. So there's a few places left to book, and you can do that online. And that, you know, if people want to get in touch with me and ask any questions about it over and above what's on site, please do. I'll be happy to answer any questions. Yeah.
And even if people just want to sample a yoga class, they can come to you just for one-off class?
Yeah, I do. I only do 1 public class a week at this stage. Everything else kind of runs on courses. So there's a public class every Friday, and that's in Home Studios, which is in Harold's Cross in Dublin 6. All of the courses take place here in my home studio, which is slightly confusing. Not home studios, but in my own studio, in my home, in my garden shed. And that's a really, really beautiful, intimate space. That's only 10, whereas home studios is a much bigger venue. And then, as you said, I have 4 retreats a year. I have holidays. Oh, there's a little person.
Little man coming in. And
so it's all there on luyoga.com under the events. So it's all there for people to read up on. Well, always things around women's health and women's well-being, and then general stuff too.
Great. And thank you so much. I've so enjoyed chatting, and
yeah, me too.
It's been great. And I hope people will go on your website and just have a look, because there's loads of stuff up there. So thank you, Lou, and we will chat again soon.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.